The Shinjuku Showdown arc is the final grand battle which decides everything within Jujutsu Kaisen. This is a story arc where Satoru Gojo, the strongest sorcerer of today, clashes with the king of curses Ryumen Sukuna, the strongest sorcerer in history. After literally years of build-up, all of the scheming, the rivalries, and the sacrifice of these characters finally comes down to one epic conclusion. By the time that you're watching this video, Jujutsu Kaisen will have wrapped up with the release of chapter 271. As the Shinjuku Showdown arc serves as the culmination of every single power-up, all of the strategies and sacrifices, as we begin with Gojo vs Sukuna. This battle is so destructive that entire city blocks are obliterated within moments. And this isn't just a battle of raw power, it's an actual psychological war. Gojo genuinely goes beyond his limits in this fight, but despite all of this, the outcome of the battle is unthinkable. This fight is about the fate of the future, as Yuji and all of the sorcerers work together in an attempt to defeat Sukuna and to rescue Megami. With Sukuna having mastered Megami's 10 Shadows technique, the tide of the battle is easily turned against the surviving Jujutsu sorcerers. This story arc is truly a desperate struggle where no one is guaranteed to survive. We see the return of some long-lost allies, there's unexpected power-ups. While all of this is going on, Megami's fate hangs in the balance, but rest assured I'm going to be covering absolutely everything in my final Jujutsu Kaisen arc analysis as I break down everything that there is to know about the Shinjuku Showdown arc. So be sure to stick around until the very end of this video as I'll be breaking down the full scale of Sukuna's devastating plans as well as the heartbreaking sacrifices that occur in this story arc. And I'll also be talking about the final 3 chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen which serve as the epilogue of the story. And you'll find out whether if Jujutsu Kaisen is actually going to be continuing beyond these 271 chapters, as there are rumors about a season 2 of the series. The Shinjuku Showdown arc spans from chapter 222 all the way up until chapter 271, the final chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen. As the final story arc of the series, we see some of the strongest Jujutsu sorcerers of the modern day going up against the king of the curses Ryumen Sukuna. The stakes are incredibly high here as the story arc kicks off with the highly anticipated final fight between Gojo vs Sukuna. All of this happens following the chaos of the culling game orchestrated by Kenjaku, as Christmas Eve rolls around and Gojo begins his fight against Sukuna, as they tear apart the city of Shinjuku, proving once and for all who is the strongest. During this battle, the limits of their domain expansions, their curse techniques, as well as their own resilience is put to the test, with there being several domain clashes between Unlimited Void and Malevolent Shrine, which perfectly represent the peak of Jujutsu combat. This fight truly was unpredictable, and the balance of power was constantly shifting. At one point Gojo had the upper hand, but then before you know it the tables have turned and Sukuna has the upper hand. Now the Shinjuku Showdown arc isn't just about Gojo and Sukuna, we have other key characters like Yuji, Yuta and Hajime Kashimo, as well as Kinji Hakari and the likes of Hiromi Higuruma. All of these characters and more participate on a final raid on Sukuna as their personal beliefs and their bonds with each other are put to the test as they face off against the overwhelming, unbeatable power of Sukuna. And all of this results in quite an interesting end to the story arc and the series of Jujutsu Kaisen, as Yuji has one final confrontation with Sukuna, which explains how their fates are intertwined and why it was so necessary for Yuji to be the one to have the final fight against Sukuna in order to give the story of Jujutsu Kaisen somewhat of a satisfactory finale, whether if you like or dislike how it ended. So let's kick things off by talking about the events of chapter 222 right before Sukuna vs Gojo starts. This chapter is titled 4 Tokens and it sets the stage for the final battle between Gojo versus the King of the Curses. Both opponents are preparing mentally, emotionally and strategically for the clash which will determine the fate of the world. Gojo returns to Jujutsu High as Sukuna begins his final preparations, and this chapter overall builds a lot of tension and it establishes the stakes of this epic encounter. We see Uraume, Sukuna's loyal follower, presenting the King of Curses with 3 of his remaining fingers, fingers. These fingers represent pieces of Sukuna's fragmented power, and they are important to fully restoring him. However, despite Uraume's best efforts, they are unable to locate the final finger of Sukuna, much to their frustration. She apologizes for the failure, but Sukuna is okay with it, as he states that he already expected this to happen. He reveals that Gojo likely has hidden the final finger as a means to indefinitely delay Yuji's execution. While it's very cunning on Gojo's part to have done this, it's also predictable as he really does care for Yuji. Uraume has a deep resentment for Gojo, as she views him hiding the final finger as a second humiliating defeat at his hands. Throughout all of this, you have to note Sukuna remains very cool and collected. He reassures Uraume, who is visibly frustrated, that they can substitute the final missing finger by consuming the head of his mummified corpse. While Sukuna's preparing in his own way, Kinjaku on the other hand contemplates the outcome of the culling game that he had just organized. While staring at his TV screen, he questions the Kogane about the number of players who have died due to curse technique removal for failing to enter a colony. The Kogane replies that 61 players have lost their lives. Kinjaku goes on a philosophical speech as he reflects on how these individuals may have avoided participation out of fear, either fear of death or fear of having to kill others. Despite this, he criticizes them for lacking intuition, as Hiromi Higuruma's added rule could have allowed them to avoid both of these situations. It's evident that Kinjaku hates individuals who are complacent, as he thinks about their flawed mindsets as they live their lives believing that everything is okay, when in truth their existence is always teetering on the edge of disaster. He expresses his hatred for individuals who refuse to risk their lives for something greater, and for those who face death without any aspirations or hope. The way that Kinjaku thinks of life and death are linked with his greater plan, which is to reshape the world through chaos. Meanwhile, at Jujutsu High, Gojo reflects on all of the losses that the sorcerers have endured following the events of the Shibuya incident as well as the culling game. It seems as though Gojo, Shoko, and Ijichi are among the few who have survived from their time at Jujutsu High. In particular, the loss of Kento Nanami weighs heavily on Gojo, as he confesses that he had always believed that Nanami was the kind of person who would be able to survive any challenge, regardless of how high the odds were stacked against him. Gojo reminds the others that he has a very important role to play now in the upcoming fight against Sukuna, as he urges Ijichi to give it his all also. At the dojo at Jujutsu High, we see Meimei the opportunist as she begins to prepare for the upcoming battle against Gojo and Sukuna in her own way by hosting an online betting game. There is a lot of interest in high stakes fights as she's able to gather a staggering 5 billion yen through pay-per-view broadcasts for the battle, and she also generates additional money from betting too. Her ability Blackbird Manipulation enables her to stream the event to a broad audience as she massively benefits financially. Also at the dojo are Yuji and Kusakabe, who are sparring, and Yuji is very determined as he throws Kusakabe to the ground. The two of them are training really hard as they prepare for the upcoming fight, and elsewhere in the dark corridors of Jujutsu High, we see Yuta and Inumaki walking side by side, and their conversation is brief but still very important, as Yuta mentions that they should not inform Yuji of Toge's injury, as this was caused by Sukuna. This again highlights how all of the sorcerers that are around Yuji know how Sukuna's actions emotionally impact him, as he does feel responsible for them. Now all of the preparations do wrap up as the highly awaited day finally arrives, December 24th, Christmas Eve, which marks the date of the battle between Gojo vs Sukuna. The setting is in Shinjuku, which has now been reduced to pretty much a wasteland known as a realm of demons. With the entire cityscape being destroyed, it is a culmination of all of the events that have led up to this moment. Sukuna, Uraume, and Kenjaku gather on the rooftop of a skyscraper as they prepare for the fight, but Kinjaku appears to have other plans as he leaves to hunt down the remaining players in the culling game, as this highlights his ulterior motives as he isn't 100% behind Sukuna and Uraume. And for this reason, Uraume is actually annoyed by Kinjaku's presence, so she's glad to see him go. Kinjaku has a very calculated strategy, as he knew that if he were to have left any sooner, then Gojo would have most likely killed him. Kinjaku is anticipating that Gojo will be defeated by Sukuna, and this will then result in Yuta, Kinji Hakari, as well as Maki and the remaining sorcerers of Jujutsu High working together in order to launch a full-on assault against Sukuna. At Jujutsu High, the tension is palpable as Gojo preps for the final fight, and all of the students are aware of the gravity of the situation as they try their best to motivate Gojo. They've always perceived Gojo as this invincible figure, someone who never seemed to struggle in battle, but this time things feel different, and Gojo's serious demeanor reflects this, as he's actually taking the task at hand very seriously. For what seems like the first time ever in the story, we actually see Gojo shed this playful, annoying persona that he has, and he appears to be exuding a very intense aura, which is unsettling others like Yuta, Maki, and even Hakari. Gojo tries to calm the tension as he invites everyone to come and give him a pat before he departs. One by one, the students slap his back, offering words of encouragement and support to him. Gojo carries all of their assurance and confidence as he looks back at them with a determined grin and assures them that he will emerge victorious. Gojo makes his way towards Shinjuku with Utahime and Gakuganji by his side. Sukuna stands ready on the other side of the city as his menacing grin mirrors Gojo's. Both of them are ready for this epic clash as the battle of the strongest is about to unfold. All of them perform a ritual which will boost Gojo's power beyond its normal limits as they utilize Utahime's solo forbidden area technique. This whole ritual is enhanced with ceremonial gestures along with chanting and music, as this massively increases Gojo's cursed energy output. Now, with this amplification, Gojo unleashes 200% Hollow Purple, an enhanced fusion of his Attraction Blue and his Repulsion Red techniques. This targets Sukuna in Shinjuku as EGG's barrier conceals the attack, preventing Sukuna from sensing it until the very last second. This attack destroys the building where Sukuna and Uraume were standing. This also destroys Sukuna's cursed energy reinforced arms, as Gojo teleports to Sukuna's location while he is healing his arms. Gojo then taunts Sukuna, declaring that despite his ancient power, it is him who is the challenger in this battle of the strongest. Sukuna heals his arms as the battle erupts in an intense close quarters fight, as Gojo's mastery of infinity enables him to effortlessly dodge Sukuna's attacks. He manipulates space with his technique Blue in order to send Sukuna crashing through multiple buildings. The King of Curses counters with domain amplification, temporarily neutralizing Gojo's infinity as he tries to level the playing field, but Gojo continues to outmaneuver him, proving that he has a superior technique and agility. The battle rages on through the destroyed streets of Shinjuku, with Gojo constantly keeping the pressure on Sukuna as he takes full advantage of his precision and unparalleled control over cursed energy as he wins most of these early exchanges in the fight. The battle escalates massively when both of them activate their domain expansions, as Gojo's Unlimited Void faces off against Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine. Each domain represents the peak of Jujutsu sorcery, as they offer guaranteed hit effects within their boundaries. However, Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine operates without a barrier, thus allowing its range to extend far beyond the limits of Gojo's domain. Sukuna exploits this advantage as he attacks Gojo's domain from the outside, slicing through the external structure of Unlimited Void and causing it to collapse. With his domain destroyed, Gojo is exposed to the full force of Malevolent Shrine, as he's on the receiving end of a relentless barrage of slashes which rain down upon him, inflicting deep wounds. Despite the numerous blows that he's taken, Gojo continuously heals himself using reverse curse technique, demonstrating incredible resilience. He also utilizes simple domain and falling blossom emotion in order to limit the damage that he receives, programming his cursed energy to counteract Sukuna's attacks upon contact. Gojo's composure remains unshaken as he continues to endure the overwhelming assault, as he is continuously thinking about how to strategize for his next move. He goes on to push his abilities to their very limits as he utilizes reverse curse technique to not only heal his injuries but to restore his exhausted limitless technique. This is something that shocks both Sukuna and all of the onlookers, with Gojo seizing the moment to close the distance within an instant, catching Sukuna off guard. He grabs Sukuna, holding him tightly as he unleashes Curse Technique Reversal Red at point blank range. This throws Sukuna's body into rubble, as it seems like Gojo has successfully disrupted his momentum. Sukuna is far from done as he expands Malevolent Shrine line to its maximum range, causing Gojo to once again activate Unlimited Void. But this time, Gojo geniusly reverses the internal and external conditions of his domain's barrier, thus increasing its resistance to external attacks. Sukuna counters by using a Binding Vow, which disables his domain's guaranteed hit effect within the barrier. He does so in order to enhance the power of his slashes outside it. As both of their domains clash once again, both of them sustain serious injuries, but neither of them appear to be letting up as they remain on equal footing. This entire exchange is just strategic genius, as Gojo shrinks his domain to the size of a small sphere, increasing its density and resistance to Sukuna's attacks. After a very intense standoff which lasts over 3 minutes, both of the domains collapse at the same time, leaving the two of them exhausted but still undeterred. Despite doing fairly well, Gojo begins to sense that something is wrong, as he notices that Sukuna has refrained from using the 10 Shadows technique, and he suspects that there's a deeper strategy at play from him. Gojo's concerns are confirmed when he witnesses Mahoraga's wheel subtly turning. This is a sign that the Shikigami is adapting to his techniques. During their exchanges, Gojo suffered a sudden nosebleed, which is a symptom of the immense strain from repeatedly restoring his curse techniques engraving in his brain. A major turning point in the battle is when Sukuna summons Mahoraga within Gojo's domain. Much to Gojo's shock, Mahoraga has already adapted to Unlimited Void, and the Shikigami destroys his domain in a single strike. Gojo realizes that Sukuna has been using Megami Soul in order to bear the burden of Mahoraga's adaptation, thus allowing the Shikigami to counter Gojo's most powerful techniques without the risk to himself. The repeated use of reverse curse technique has begun to take a toll on Gojo, as this is causing damage to his brain and limiting his ability to continue restoring his powers. Because he's been using reverse curse technique to forcibly restore his exhausted curse technique after every domain clash. Now what you have to remember is that at this point there have been 5 domain clashes, and he's done this 5 times and it's brought him down to his absolute limit, and he falls to his knees. He is unable to open his domain due to all of the accumulated damage to his brain. With Mahoraga now fully adapted, Sukuna escalates the battle by summoning Merged Beast Agito, as it transforms the entire battle into a 3-on-1 onslaught. Gojo finds himself battling Sukuna and 2 powerful Shikigami at the same time. Despite the overwhelming odds, he fights with a lot of strength, as he utilizes Curse Technique Lapse Blue in order to slow down Mahoraga's adaptation process, and he strategically avoids using Curse Technique Reversal in order to prevent Mahoraga from adapting any further. Gojo lands several devastating Black Flash attacks against Sukuna, and this momentarily does tip the scales in his favor, but Mahoraga's wheel continues to turn, as this signals its impending adaptation to Gojo's infinity. Realizing the conventional tactics are no longer sufficient here, Gojo decides to end the fight with an unlimited Hollow Purple. In a very high stakes move, Gojo combines his blue and red techniques to create a massive Hollow Purple. He cleverly manipulates the battlefield using blue in order to accelerate himself and intercept Mahoraga's attempts to stop the convergence of red and blue. The colossal blast disintegrates Mahoraga and deals severe damage to Sukuna, as all of the viewers who are watching believe that Gojo has finally secured the victory. Just as it seems like the end of the fight is within reach of Gojo, Sukuna unveils his ultimate strategy. After having studied Mahoraga's adaptation, he mimics the Shikigami's ability to bypass Gojo's infinity by expanding the target of his dismantle technique to slash the world itself. This world-cutting slash disregards the infinity by affecting the very space around Gojo. This is an unbelievably effective attack, as in a devastating instance, the slash cuts Gojo in half, splitting his body in half and securing Sukuna's victory. As Gojo falls, he experiences a profound sense of peace as he reflects on the battle. In his final moments, he feels satisfied that he had pushed himself to his very limits. Gojo envisions his fallen comrades, including Suguru Geto, and accepts his fate without regret, and he is content that he had fought with everything that he had. Despite sustaining serious injuries, at the end of the fight, Sukuna stands victorious. He acknowledges Gojo's unparalleled strength and even praises him as a magnificent sorcerer that he will never forget. Gojo's legacy as the strongest of the modern day remains unshaken even in death. Meanwhile, all of the allies prepare to continue the fight against Sukuna Sukuna as the King of Curses enjoys this hard-fought victory. Hajime Kashimo is the first to step forward as the next challenger, determined to avenge the death of Gojo and to bring an end to Sukuna's reign of terror. The death of Gojo just caught a lot of us by surprise. I mean, it just happened out of nowhere. It was very abrupt, but his death does have thematic implications for Jujutsu Kaisen. His students and the surviving Jujutsu sorcerers are literally vulnerable now, and it forces them to rise to the occasion without the strongest sorcerer there to protect them. Gojo's exit from the story, while very devastating, it liberates the narrative of Jujutsu Kaisen from his overwhelming presence, because no matter how big the threat was, as long as Gojo is there, then everything's going to be okay, right? Now that you've taken Gojo away from the equation, it does create space for other characters to grow and to face off against challenges that even Gojo wasn't able to overcome. While yes, it's incredibly sad and I didn't want to see Gojo go, his death does act as a catalyst for the character development of everybody else who now has the opportunity to battle Sukuna. And the way that Gojo felt satisfied by giving it his all, and he sees all of his friends before he passes away, and how he's content with letting his students now continue, it's a symbolic passing of the torch. His legacy will now endure through all of the lessons that he has imparted, as well as inspiration that he has given to the next generation of sorcerers. So now, with Hajime Kashimo preparing to battle Sukuna, he not only wants to fight him, but he wants to discover the essence of true strength. He wants to do this by defeating Sukuna, and this is a central theme of this battle. Kashimo makes a dramatic entrance as he leaps from 203 meters in the air, and at the same time a massive block of ice descends from the sky carrying Uraume, Sukuna's loyal assistant. Hakari, a strong ally of Kashimo, intervenes before Uraume can join the fight, thus trapping Uraume within his domain in order to allow Kashimo to have a one-on-one fight with Sukuna. Hakari interferes here as he prioritizes fulfilling his promise to Kashimo. Meanwhile, Sukuna prepares for the next move as the block of ice that Uraume descended on turns out to be a tool, delivering Sukuna a replica of the cursed weapon Kamutoke. This weapon was created by Yorozu as a gift to Sukuna through a binding vow at the very end of her life. Sukuna wastes very little time as he uses Kamutoke, summoning a devastating bolt of lightning which is aimed directly at Kashimo, but Kashimo, being a master of lightning himself, is unaffected by the attack, with Kashimo asking Sukuna a philosophical question about whether if Sukuna was born the strongest or if he had to earn that title. Sukuna responds ambiguously, explaining that he was born cursed and unwanted, not really providing a clear answer to Kashimo's question. Kashimo reflects on his own life and admits that he has never been able to connect with those around him, as he views everyone else as insignificant. He wonders if being the strongest means being eternally cursed to seek more power in solitude. Sukuna, calling him greedy, dismisses this notion, accusing both Kashimo and Gojo of wanting too much. With that, the battle between the two of them continues. Kashimo unleashes his innate curse technique called Mythical Beast Amber. This dramatically increases his speed and physical capabilities, allowing him to attack Sukuna with a series of powerful punches. The technique pushes Kashimo's body beyond human limits as it optimizes the brain's electrical signals and enhances physical abilities. While this does allow Kashimo to momentarily overwhelm Sukuna, it also comes at a massive cost. Once the technique ends, his body will begin to deteriorate and crumble away. Kashimo takes full advantage of this temporary power boost, and he delivers a powerful lightning attack that seems to incapacitate Sukuna. But the King of Curses, in a very calculated move, has been saving a very important ability to use up until now. This technique allows him to fully restore his body by returning to his original true form. Towards the end of chapter 237, Sukuna begins to undergo a transformation. Sukuna was saving this for the right moment because he can only use it once. Sukuna fully incarnates into his true form, a monstrous state where he possesses 4 arms and 2 mouths. These extra limbs and mouths provide Sukuna with the unique advantage of being able to form hand seals and chant incantations simultaneously. This gives him a huge tactical advantage in Jujutsu combat. The transformation reveals the true power of the King of Curses, as it was this true form of Sukuna which was responsible for destroying entire armies during the Heian era. This includes the Sun, Moon and Star Squad, as well as several other elite groups. Kashimo uses uses his analytical abilities as he recognizes that Sukuna's current form represents absolute perfection. Sukuna's body is operating without any hindrances here, even in its grotesque mutated state. Despite being absolutely impressed by Sukuna's power, Kashimo remains determined to fight him. As they continue to clash, Sukuna swiftly overpowers Kashimo in hand-to-hand combat, forcing him to retreat. Then, in an absolutely amazing display of power, he unleashes his dismantle attack, which Kashimo quickly recognizes as the same ability which Sukuna had used to kill Gojo. Despite the danger, Kashimo manages to dodge the brunt of the attack, losing only a part of his hand. Then there appears to be somewhat of a pause in the action as Sukuna reflects on his past, mentioning Yorozu, a sorcerer who once preached to him about love. Yorozu believed that Sukuna, due to his unrivaled strength, was peerless and isolated, and he was incapable of understanding this concept of love. Sukuna dismisses her beliefs as foolish and annoying, though he admits that Kashimo and Gojo might have benefited from her points of view. Sukuna's reflection on love and strength from his past provide an insightful look into his complex character via these glimpses into his past. While yes, Gojo understands the concepts of love and companionship, he finds them irrelevant to his own existence as he doesn't need them. He accuses Kashimo of not fully comprehending what Sukuna wants, as Sukuna believes that the true nature of strength lies in responding to others' desires for power. With the battle intensifying, Sukuna uses the advantages of his new form to immobilize Kashimo as he quickly pins down his arms and begins to pummel him with a series of brutal punches. Sukuna's true form allows him to easily dominate and overwhelm Kashimo at every turn. He then uses his Kamutoke weapon to summon another bolt of lightning, using it as a diversion to launch a devastating attack which sends Kashimo flying through the air. As Kashimo tries to counter, Sukuna traps him in a massive net of dismantle slashes, leaving no room for escape. We then get what appears to be an internal dialogue as Kashimo has a final conversation with Sukuna. Sukuna explains that strength is not about solitude or isolation. It is a give and take relationship that exists between the individual who is the strongest and everybody else who desires to challenge them. According to Sukuna, strength is a form of love, where the strongest responds to the desires of others with their power. In this way, Sukuna believes that he is loved for his strength, and in turn he shows his love by displaying just how strong he is. This philosophical exchange offers a bit of a deeper understanding to Sukuna's worldview, especially in regards to strength as a transactional relationship rather than something which isolates individuals. In a lot of media, this idea of somebody being the strongest and being isolated because of it is often used as a trope to explain why that character is isolated. A notable example is Stark from Bleach, who is the #1 ranking Espada. Because of his incredible strength, he had felt isolation because he had no equal, and his immense strength had pushed others away from him. In an attempt to escape his loneliness, Stark had split his soul into two, which had ended up creating Lily Neck. Coming back to the fight, Kashimo is unconvinced by Sukuna's reasoning as he questions Sukuna's choices, especially in regards to why the King of Curses would go to the lengths of splitting his soul into cursed objects if he finds isolation so fulfilling. Sukuna reveals that for him, love is worthless, and he never needed anyone to complete his existence. The solitude that Kashimo and Gojo feel as a result of being the strongest, in Sukuna's eyes, is a natural state that one must embrace without regret. Chapter 238 ends with Sukuna explaining that the flavors of humanity, like life itself, are fleeting, and he consumes them to pass the time until the end. Now, with the death of Kashimo, the stage is set for the next battle as Yuji and Higuruma make their grand entrance onto the battlefield, ready to face off against Sukuna. Sukuna just appears to be annoyed as soon as he sees Yuji once again, as he questions what the young sorcerer hopes to achieve by confronting him now. So far we've seen a lot of Gojo, but what on earth has been going on with Kinjaku? The story shifts our attention to the ancient sorcerer from chapter 239 as we follow him attempting to hunt down the remaining players of the culling game. In the Lake Gosho colony, Kenjaku tracks an incarnated female player, cornering her in a forest. She attempts to flee as she reflects on the cruelty of being reincarnated, only to face death again. Kinjaku effortlessly defeats her by suffocating her with a curse and crushing her under its weight. Aori Hazenoki, a culling game player, interrupts Kinjaku as Hazenoki mockingly engages engages with him as she comments on Kinjaku's tendency to talk to himself, as Kinjaku admits that he can't help it because he has a lack of friends and he's lonely. Their banter quickly turns to battle as Kinjaku unleashes cursed spirits on Hazanoki, testing his ability to use his reverse curse technique. Despite Hazanoki putting up a fair fight, Kinjaku overpowers him, targeting his head in order to prevent him from regenerating. Before Hazanoki is defeated, he asks Kenjaku about his motives, as the ancient sorcerer explains that the culling game is essential for his plan to merge all humans with Tengen, the Jujutsu sorcerer who maintains the barrier between the worlds of Jujutsu sorcerers and cursed spirits. Kinjaku is driven by curiosity and a desire to witness what has never been seen before. Hazanoki, not understanding this ambition, mocks Kinjaku for one final time before he is killed. Shortly after this, Fumihiko Takaba, a comedian turned Jujutsu sorcerer who we've become very familiar with from the culling game arc, he arrives onto the scene. Despite Kinjaku's cursed spirits attacking him, Takaba emerges unscathed. His curse technique, comedian, enables him to manifest anything that he believes to be funny into reality, thus rendering Kinjaku's attacks useless. It's safe to say that Takaba confuses the hell out of Kinjaku as he prepares for a very unpredictable battle against him. Chapter 240 provides some behind the scenes insights into the planning stages before the Shinjuku Showdown had happened. Angel speaks with the Jujutsu High sorcerers about the importance of stopping Kenjaku even if Sukuna is defeated. If Kenjaku merges Japan with Master Tengen, then their efforts against Sukuna would be futile. The group debates who should face off against Kenjaku, with Angel suggesting that Fumihiko Takaba might be the ideal candidate due to his unconventional but yet powerful technique. Back in the present day, Kenjaku struggles to understand Takaba's ability. His powers appear to be rooted in comedy, making it difficult for Kenjaku's attacks to have any real effect. Takaba, in his usual funny manner, manifests bizarre phenomena like bandanas and sunglasses for Kinjaku, who realizes that Takaba's ability stems from his imagination. If Takaba believes something is funny, then it becomes reality, thus rendering Kinjaku's thousands of years of Jujutsu knowledge pretty much irrelevant. The two then partake in a comedic dialogue, with Takaba highlighting his confidence in his comedic abilities. However, at this point, Kenjaku becomes aware of the limitations of Takaba's curse technique as he criticizes his jokes, specifically pointing out their lack of structure. Kinjaku's critical analysis begins to shake Takaba's resolve and his confidence as he begins to remember moments from the past where his comedic skills were called into question. His technique starts to falter now as Kinjaku seizes the opportunity to strike, sending Takaba crashing into the forest. Takaba begins to think back on his journey as a comedian, and we get a flashback which reveals a key moment from his past. This is where he had clashed with his partner over their dedication to comedy. His partner had accused Takaba of taking comedy too seriously, thus making it unenjoyable for both the audience and himself. This moment deeply affected Takaba's self-confidence, leading him to question his ability to make people laugh. As Takaba thinks back on his past failures, he remembers the real reason that he had become a comedian, and it was to connect with people and to avoid loneliness. This realization reignites Takaba's determination as he regains his confidence in the present. Takaba apologizes to Kinjaku as he admits that he had discounted his abilities in order to protect his own ego. With this newfound resolve, Takaba vows to make Kinjaku laugh as he fully activates his curse technique. Kinjaku senses a shift in Takaba's demeanor as he prepares for a more intense battle. He realizes that Takaba's powers are fueled by his confidence and his certainty. As long as Takaba believes in the humor of his actions, then his technique will be unbeatable. The stage is now set for a clash where Takaba's resolve to make everyone laugh is the only thing that will keep him alive. In chapter 242, Takaba goes on the offensive, with Kinjaku being aware of the danger that Takaba poses as he summons a special grade cursed spirit, Akuro or Otake. However, Takaba, in a comedic twist, defeats the curse by running it over with an imaginary truck. The two then engage in a series of bizarre and comedic scenarios, with Takaba controlling the narrative through his imagination. The battle shifts into surreal territory, with Takaba and Kenjaku manifesting various comedic setups. At one point, they transform into doctors trying to save a goldfish, and later they partake in a game game show where Takaba struggles to answer trivia questions. Kinjaku initially is frustrated by the absurdity of all of these situations, but he begins to enjoy the unpredictable nature of Takaba's curse technique. He then realizes that their souls are actually resonating, thus allowing them to share the same comedic wavelength. Despite the light-hearted nature of this battle, Kenjaku grows concerned. Takaba's comedic technique is causing real damage, and if the fight continues in this way, then Kinjaku knows that he will eventually lose. The only way to end this fight is for Takaba to be satisfied with the outcome, and this proves to be a bit more of a complicated challenge than Kinjaku had anticipated. What is really strange, in chapter 243, it leads to Takaba and Kinjaku performing a full comedy routine together. Now, this is foreshadowing for something that we see in chapter 270, but I'll talk about that way later in the video. Inside the imaginary world created by Takaba's curse technique, the two of them walk on a stage as a comedy duo called Pinchan, and they begin their act. Their performance involves retelling the folktale of Momotaro, with Takaba and Kinjaku playing the roles of the characters. The routine is filled with witty banter and a lot of absurd twists as it showcases the full extent of Takaba's ability. With the performance continuing, Takaba realizes that his dream of making everyone laugh is coming to an end. He starts getting emotional and he doesn't want the show to stop, and Kinjaku senses Takaba's vulnerability and he encourages him to finish the act. As this imaginary scenario begins to fade, Takaba is grateful to Kinjaku for being a part of his performance. Now, back in reality, Yuta appears behind Kinjaku and he swiftly decapitates him. It seems like Kinjaku is still alive for the time being as he reflects on the influence that Takaba has had on him. Thinking about it, Takaba's curse technique had stopped Kinjaku from sensing Yuta's presence. This had led to a surprise opening which Yuta had taken full advantage of as he was successfully able to deal a fatal blow. Despite the fact that Kinjaku is at death's door, he expresses satisfaction with how things had ended up unfolding, and he is confident that his will or his desire will be carried on. Kinjaku's main desire was to merge all of the people of Japan with Master Tengen, as well as significant details from the Culling Games arc, like the outside world now being aware of cursed spirits and cursed energy, and what exactly the implications of this are. All of these loose plot threads, which appear to not have been tied together by the end of the series, seem to be giving hope to people that Jujutsu Kaisen is going to be continuing with a sequel manga series. I felt like it was important to speak about this while discussing the character of Kenjaku, and I'll come back to this at the end of the video when I discuss how Jujutsu Kaisen ends with chapter 271, and if in fact we are going to be getting a sequel series based upon how the manga ends. Our attention now returns to the Shinjuku Showdown. Following the defeat of Gojo and Hajime Kashimo, we begin the third round of the fight against Sukuna, with Hiromi Higuruma and Yuji Itadori being the next challengers to fight the King of Curses. The Jujutsu High sorcerers had earlier spoken about their strategy to deal with Sukuna if Gojo was to be defeated. Kusakabe reminds everyone that Takaba's role was to distract Kenjaku, thus allowing Yuta to kill him. However, for the fight against Sukuna, Kashimo insisted on fighting him first. Kusakabe countered, suggesting that not everyone could survive Sukuna, especially if they lacked reverse curse technique or didn't mind dying. Higuruma was next to volunteer after Kashimo, explaining that his deadly sentencing technique would be able to confiscate Sukuna's abilities, potentially leading to a death sentence for the King of Curses. However, there were uncertainties about how the judgment may unfold given Sukuna's ancient history and the multiple crimes that he has committed through Yuji's body. The plan is put into action as Meimei distracts Sukuna with her bird strike, thus allowing Higuruma and Yuji to attack. Higuruma immediately activates his domain expansion and announces a retrial of Sukuna, including him in the case for the mass murder at Shibuya. They hope that the charges will lead to a death sentence, allowing Higuruma to use the executioner's sword against him. In chapter 245, Kinji Hikari and Uraume engage in a fierce battle. Uraume uses frost calm, freezing Hakari's arm and shattering it, but Hakari quickly regenerates by using reverse curse technique. Uraume acknowledges that Hakari's regeneration abilities surpass even those of Sukuna and Gojo. Despite the powerful ice-based attacks, Hakari continues to heal instantly as he relentlessly fights back, not being afraid of anything that Uraume has to offer. Meanwhile, back in the courtroom of Higuruma's deadly sentencing, Sukuna interrupts the rules of Higuruma's trial as he says that he's already learnt about them from Yuji's earlier trial. Sukuna admits that he is guilty, resulting in Judgeman issuing a sentence of confiscation and death penalty. Higuruma speculates that Sukuna has lost his 10 Shadows technique, thus assuming that the sorcerers now have an opening to defeat him. However, a critical mistake has been made when it becomes clear that confiscation has taken away Sukuna's curse tool Kamutoke instead of his shrine technique. Unfortunately, Sukuna still retains his core abilities, thus not really changing the situation much for the sorcerers. Kusakabe then activates his simple domain in order to defend against Sukuna's slashes while analyzing his techniques. Kusakabe realizes that Sukuna's most devastating attacks, such as the enhanced dismantle, are able to slice through the world, and they may require preparation or a binding vow to counter. Despite their strategic efforts, Sukuna proves too fast for the sorcerers, as Chozo even attempts to attack with piercing blood, but Sukuna easily counters and he ends up gravely wounding him. Takuma then attempts to strike with a curse tool which is imbued with Nanami's ratio technique, but Sukuna blocks it and kicks him away with overwhelming force. Higuruma, who appears to be on his own and is overwhelmed, now faces the full wrath of Sukuna, as the King of Curses effortlessly punches and throws him aside. He chases after the injured lawyer in order to finish him off, and at the same time Yuji attempts to keep up with Sukuna and to protect Higuruma, but the difference in their speed is too much as it leaves Yuji struggling to keep up and close the distance. Inside of a destroyed building, Higuruma regains his footing, with Sukuna closing in on him as he delivers more devastating slashes, leaving Higuruma badly wounded and trapped. Despite the injuries, he remembers Yuji's plan to use his curse technique in order to save Megumi. By killing Sukuna with the Executioner's sword, Megumi's soul would theoretically return to his body, freeing him from Sukuna's clutches. A flashback reveals a conversation that Yuji had with Higuruma about his willingness to die for the mission. Higuruma carries guilt for abandoning the law as he feels that he must fulfill his role before dying, but Yuji insists on him to stay alive. After remembering this, Higuruma musters up the strength to continue as he uses domain amplification in order to neutralize the slashes of Sukuna. The King of Curses is impressed by Higuruma's rapid growth as a sorcerer, as he has learnt and developed his abilities in such a short period of time, and he believes that his talent rivals that of Satoru Gojo. Chapter 246 concludes with Higuruma preparing for one final stand as he wields the Executioner's sword in a last bid to defeat Sukuna. Sukuna is fascinated by Higuruma's ability and his anti-domain techniques, especially with how he interrupts and resumes the Executioner sword's effects, similar to what Sukuna did in his battle with Gojo by using Mahoraga's adaptation process. Sukuna decides to push Higuruma further, testing the limits of his newfound abilities. He uses Dismantle, cutting apart a building which begins to rain down debris as Higuruma charges towards Sukuna, but Sukuna uses his cleave to slice through the falling rubble, momentarily distracting Higuruma. Seeing this as a chance, Sukuna targets Yuji, who has rejoined the fight, as Yuji tries to land a punch, but Sukuna effortlessly intercepts it, grabbing his torso and using cleave in order to cut half of Yuji's body into pieces. As Yuji collapses, Sukuna mocks him, saying how uninteresting he has become. Higuruma's fight with Sukuna resumes amidst all of the debris as Higuruma swings the Executioner's sword in desperation, but Sukuna lands a series of punches, thus forcing Higuruma back. Eventually, Sukuna retreats and chants an incantation in order to unleash a world-cutting slash, aiming to finish off Higuruma. The lawyer narrowly dodges the slash, but loses his right arm in the process. Sukuna taunts him, demanding that he use reverse curse technique in order to heal the injury, but Higuruma charges forward as Sukuna responds by cutting off his left hand and then slashing his legs, immobilizing him. Sukuna then encourages Higuruma to heal himself, threatening to cut off his head if he doesn't listen. As Higuruma contemplates his inevitable death, Chozo then intervenes begins, striking Sukuna with piercing blood. Sukuna blocks the attack, acknowledging the presence of Chozo. Higuruma takes advantage of the distraction as he heals his injuries and stabs Sukuna with the executioner's sword. However, Sukuna reveals that he had severed his own hand before the strike landed, rendering the attack useless. As Sukuna gets ready to defeat him with cleave, Higuruma reflects on his efforts and his desires to die with purpose. Just before Sukuna lands the final blow, Higuruma tosses the cross from the executioner's sword to Yuji, who has miraculously recovered. Chapter 247 ends with Yuji getting ready to strike Sukuna from behind, channeling Nanami's last words as his motivation. Sukuna barely avoids Yuji's attempt to stab him with the executioner's sword. As Higuruma collapses, his life force begins to reduce. Yuji watches helplessly as the executioner's sword begins to lose its light and disintegrates. The King of Curses, not giving Yuji any time to mourn, lands several powerful punches on him, followed up by 2 dismantle slashes which push Yuji further back. Now at this point, Kirara and Ui have arrived on the battlefield as they retrieve Higuruma's body before teleporting away. Sukuna isn't surprised as he deduces that Ui's teleportation technique was used to transport Gojo's corpse earlier too. He dismisses the likelihood of Shoko being able to save Higuruma as he notes that the reverse curse technique is less effective if used on someone else's body instead of your own. Sukuna notices something unexpected though. Yuji has begun healing his injuries by using reverse curse technique. This is a skill that he had learned over the past month during the waiting time leading up to the Shinjuku Showdown. Despite his previous excitement at the prospect of killing both Yuji and Yuta, Sukuna finds himself quite irritated and he doesn't understand why. He thinks back on his emotions as Sukuna realizes that his irritation stems from Yuji's unyielding spirit. Having shared a body with Yuji, Sukuna is deeply aware of his relentless willpower. This is a trait that has disrupted Sukuna's own hedonistic worldview. The idea that someone weaker than him can challenge him through sheer determination angers Sukuna greatly, as it represents everything that he has come to despise. It stands against all of Sukuna's ideals, his purpose, as well as his ambition. Just as the King of Curses comes to this realization, a bright orb of light appears above his head as Yuji's Kogane announces Rule 15 of the Culling Game. This grants Megumi, and by extension Sukuna, the authority to activate the Great Merger between Tengen and humanity. This was Kinjaku's failsafe in case of his death. This reveals that Yuta's surprise attack may have been successful in killing Kenjaku. As Sukuna absorbs the glowing orb, he declares his intention to destroy all the Jujutsu sorcerers, as well as the remaining Culling Game players, and finally the monster which will be created from merging Tengen with humanity. All of a sudden, the ground collapses beneath Sukuna as Yuta Okotsu finally arrives on the battlefield, apologizing for his delayed entrance. Sukuna immediately attacks Yuta, but the special grade sorcerer blocks with his katana as Rika, the Queen of Curses, appears and slams Sukuna into a nearby building. Now this perfectly sets the stage for the new super exciting confrontation between Yuta and Sukuna. We go slightly back in time in chapter 249 as it begins with the aftermath of Kenjaku's death, as we see how he loses control over his cursed spirit manipulation. This leads to all of the cursed spirits that he has absorbed and accumulated being released, and it creates chaos. Rika immediately jumps into action, stopping the rampaging cursed spirits by destroying most of them, preventing further damage. In the meantime, while Kinjaku is dead, his backup plan has been activated as his head is attached to a writhing black mass, and it requests his Kogane to add a rule to the Culling Game, which grants Megumi the authority to initiate the Great Merger between the Japanese people and Tengen. The plan was always to have Sukuna undergo the succession ritual, using the Culling Game as the basis to override the originator of the merging ritual. As Yuta and Rika continue battling Sukuna, Yuta notices that Sukuna's reverse curse technique is slowly recovering. This means that he could regain the ability to use his domain expansion very soon. Yuta blames himself for the death of Higuruma and the failure of their earlier plan, but he resolves to make up for it now. He attacks Sukuna with Rika distracting Sukuna's vision, as Yuta and Sukuna engage in an intense physical fight, with Yuta making a decisive move by activating his domain expansion Authentic Mutual Love. Sukuna immediately counters Yuta's domain with Hollow Wicker Basket, nullifying the guaranteed hit effect of his domain. Yuta quickly grabs one of the many katanas created by his domain as he utilizes Thin Icebreaker in order to enhance the force of the sword, cracking the blade on Sukuna. The King of Curses realizes Yuta's plan. He deduces that Yuta has likely copied the Angel's technique called Extinguishment, and he intends to constantly pressure Sukuna by forcing him to neutralize Yuta's domain, as half of Sukuna's mouths and hands would be occupied with this, giving Yuta the opportunity to use his copied curse technique so that Yuji could then tear Sukuna away from Megami's body via his soul targeting punches. Sukuna is aware of everybody's abilities thanks to the memories of Megami. In chapter 250, we see that Yuta's domain expansion grants him access to use a variety of copied techniques, each of them stored within different katanas inside of his domain. Yuta uses a sword containing Dhruv Lakdawala's technique, creating miniature Shikigami in order to help him in the fight against Sukuna. Meanwhile, Yuji lands punches on Sukuna which seem to affect him in a certain way. As the battle intensifies, Sukuna realizes that Yuta is using a technique which imposes an unbreakable barrier on the Shikigami's paths. Yuta hovers in the air using Takako Uro's technique as the King of Curses assesses his own weakened condition after his battle with Gojo. Sukuna's cursed energy reserves are now comparable to Yuta's, and he is forced to constantly maintain Hollow Wicker Basket, limiting his ability to unleash more powerful techniques. Yuji and Yuta continue their relentless assault, with Yuji's punches now targeting the boundary between Megami and Sukuna's souls, slowly weakening Sukuna's control over Megami's body. He then attempts to activate Cleave, but Yuta uses Cursed Speech to stop him from moving. Yuta then lands a powerful blow with Thin Icebreaker, pushing Sukuna into a pillar. Sukuna then fights back with Dismantle, slashing Yuta and Yuji as he forces them to retreat, while Rika continues to engage Sukuna. During the fight, Sukuna notes the impressive growth of Yuta and Yuji, acknowledging that they both have acquired immense power through a combination of hard work and clever strategies. Yuji and Yuta press their attacks, with Yuta copying Sukuna's own technique Cleave and using it against him. This copied Cleave attack lands a successful strike on Sukuna's face, stunning him. Sukuna quickly realizes that Yuta had Rika consume his final finger, thus allowing Yuta to copy the Cleave technique. This revelation gives Yuta and Yuji a strategic advantage, but Sukuna retaliates by heavily injuring Yuji with Cleave. Despite his injuries, Yuji continues to fight back as he spits blood into Sukuna's eyes and allows Yuta to land another powerful blow against him. With Sukuna's cursed energy and control over Megami's body weakening, Yuta and Yuji coordinate their attacks in order to further restrict Sukuna's movements. Rika then restrains two of Sukuna's arms, while Yuji grabs another, and Yuta takes the opportunity to strike at the mouth on Sukuna's stomach, as he rips out its tongue in order to prevent him from chanting cursed incantations. Despite all of this, Sukuna manages to slash Yuta with Dismantle, forcing Yuta to retreat for a moment. The fight gets even more intense as Yuji recalls their earlier talk about souls and the possibility of knocking Megami's soul awake. While the punches of Yuji are slowly helping Megami resurface, Sukuna uses the opportunity to finish the chant for Dismantle. He then slashes through Yuta's body, injuring both Rika and Yuji, but before Sukuna can claim victory, Maki appears using the Split Soul Katana to stab Sukuna through the heart. As chapter 252 begins, the focus briefly shifts to Kusakabe and Takuma, who appear to be located outside of Yuta's domain. Kusakabe explains their plan to strike Sukuna while he is distracted, with Maki playing a key role in the ambush. As Yuta's domain shatters, it signals the moment for Maki to strike, and this is where she stabs Sukuna through the heart with her Split Soul Katana. Sukuna realizes that the wound inflicted by Maki is healing much more slowly than his other injuries, and this is thanks to Maki's ability to perceive souls and the katana's unique properties, which make it very difficult to heal using reverse curse technique. As Yuji continues the fight, he suddenly collapses, realizing that he hasn't fully healed his prior injuries. Chozo then arrives to help Yuji, guiding him on how to heal himself by using his blood manipulation. Meanwhile, Maki and Sukuna engage in an intense fight, with Maki's skills proving to be a match for Sukuna's. The chapter then shifts to Kinji Hakari and Uraume, who are also locked in their own battle, as Uraume taunts Hakari, stating that Sukuna has yet to go all out, and just as we were thinking that the fight against Sukuna was wrapping up, these words from Uraume reveal that the fight is still far from over. Despite how many opponents he has faced off against and how many injuries he has sustained, the threat from Sukuna is still really high. Maki and Sukuna's battle continues as Sukuna becomes more interested in Maki's heavenly restriction, as he acknowledges that her physical abilities may surpass Jujutsu sorcery. Their intense fight rages through the streets of Shinjuku, with Sukuna launching several dismantle slashes that Maki skillfully avoids. Takuma attempts to assist by attacking Sukuna, but is quickly overpowered. Kusakabe also attempts to help, but Sukuna anticipates his attack and counters, forcing Kusakabe to retreat. Maki continues her attack on Sukuna, who begins to enjoy the challenge that she presents. He acknowledges that her existence, free from Jujutsu sorcery, is a direct opposition to what sorcery represents. As the battle intensifies, Sukuna lands a powerful black flash on Maki, sending her flying. Despite this, Maki refuses to back down, as Kusakabe realizes that he has no choice but to face Sukuna head on, setting the stage for the next phase of this fight. Kusakabe begins with a simple domain as he activates his Evening Moon Sword drawing. This increases his cursed energy output while slightly weakening Sukuna's cursed techniques within his domain. The simple domain helps Kusakabe to deflect Sukuna's dismantle attacks. Sukuna tests out Kusakabe's strength and is surprised by his speed and precision, as Kusakabe's domain is programmed to automatically intercept incoming attacks. A flashback reveals that sorcerers like Meimei and Nanami, as well as Gojo, had considered Kusakabe to be the most versatile grade 1 sorcerer, as they had cited his mastery of swordsmanship as well as barrier techniques and excellent decision-making skills as key points which had contributed to his grade 1 sorcerer rank. With the battle continuing, Kusakabe manages to injure Sukuna and holds his own ground surprisingly, but eventually his katana does break. In a last-ditch effort, he restores his blade with Hazy Moon and targets Sukuna's weakened heart. However, the King of Curses anticipates this and catches the katana, slashing Kusakabe in return. Just before Sukuna can finish him off, Ui teleports Kusakabe away to safety. Then Miguel, another powerful ally, appears as he mocks Sukuna's limited knowledge of his identity. Chapter 255 introduces us to Miguel and Laru, two former allies of Geto who joined the fight against Sukuna. A flashback shows Yuta and Laru visiting Miguel in Africa in order to convince him to help in the fight. Although Miguel initially had refused, as he had cited Sukuna's power as too dangerous, he eventually agreed after a heartfelt conversation with Laru, deciding to honor Geto's memory. Back in the present day, Miguel and Laru join forces with the other sorcerers, and they take advantage of Sukuna's weakened state, with his heart still healing and his cursed energy output being diminished. Laru uses his heart catch technique, which is a conjuring ability that grabs and crushes targets, while Miguel employs prayer song, which enhances his physical abilities and it repels curses. Despite their best efforts, Sukuna counters their attacks and the battle escalates. While Sukuna is fighting Miguel, Chozo and Yuji rejoin the fight as Yuji crashes through the ceiling, ready to continue the battle, just as Maki cuts off one of Sukuna's hands. At this point, Sukuna is further weakened, but just as the sorcerers think that they have the upper hand, Sukuna lands his second black flash on Laru, signaling the possibility that the King of Curses may regain his full curse technique output very soon. The sorcerers begin to realize the gravity of their situation now that Sukuna has landed a black flash. This was an attack that even Gojo wasn't able to control. The black flash brings Sukuna into a heightened state of power, allowing him to potentially regain his reverse curse technique output. Yuji, Maki and Chozo continue their desperate attacks, with Maki displaying a lot of physical strength as she fights Sukuna in mid-air, using the air as footing. The raid on Sukuna is intensifying and things are getting really exciting as the sorcerers are trying their best to stop Sukuna before he recovers, but Sukuna is now in the zone as he lands his third Black Flash on Maki, sending her crashing through a window. Chozo uses his supernova technique to create a cloud of debris, but Sukuna grabs him and delivers another Black Flash, severely injuring Chozo. Despite the relentless amount of attacks, Yuji perseveres and he manages to land a Black Flash of his own against Sukuna, and this is thanks to Laru's cutie honey technique, which momentarily distracts Sukuna by redirecting his attention. Yuji's punch infused with Black Flash unleashes a burst of cursed energy, temporarily overpowering Sukuna. In chapter 257, we learn the mysterious origins of Yuji as Sukuna reveals that Yuji is the child of Kenjaku and his father Jin Itadori, and we learn that Jin Itadori is the reincarnation of Sukuna's twin brother who Sukuna had consumed in the womb. This explains why Yuji has insane amounts of potential and why he is connected to Sukuna. In the present day, Yuji and Sukuna continue to exchange intense blows which are infused with Black Flash, with every punch growing more and more intense. With Yuji now wielding two curse techniques which are blood manipulation and shrine, it leads to him displaying his newfound abilities. He throws a pillar at Sukuna who slices it into pieces, but Yuji uses the debris to get close and land another Black Flash. Takuma joins the fight and summons a dragon-like creature called Auspicious Beast number 4 Ryu. Although Ryu is quickly destroyed by Sukuna, Takuma's efforts distract Sukuna long enough for Yuji to land a 7th consecutive Black Flash, absolutely stunning the King of Curses. Sukuna grows increasingly frustrated with Yuji's never give up attitude as Yuji continues landing powerful blows, and even Nanami's blunt sword thrown by Takuma slashes Sukuna's neck. Then after this, you guessed it, Yuji lands his 8th Black Flash, pushing Sukuna further into a corner. Now Yuji and Sukuna continue to clash as Sukuna tries to regain his power, reactivating an incomplete version of Malevolent Shrine. Despite his injuries and his weakened state, Sukuna's domain causes massive destruction and it reduces the surroundings to dust. The instability of the domain is due to Sukuna being unable to maintain it for longer than 99 seconds. Yuji, Chozo, and Takuma activate their simple domains as they endure the barrage of slashes from Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine. As the domain begins to crumble, Yuji loses his left foot but quickly reattaches it by using blood manipulation. This just highlights Yuji's determination and his ability to rapidly develop his abilities. And this is all while he's in the midst of battle against one of the strongest characters in existence. In the final moments of chapter 258, Sukuna gets ready for a new unbelievable attack called Divine Flame, as this signals the next part of the battle as Sukuna chants Divine Flame open and Yuji gets ready for what's about to happen. Sukuna releases his Divine Flame within the domain, creating massive thermobaric explosions intended to kill everything within its radius. Unfortunately, Chozo sacrifices himself in order to shield Yuji from the flames, using a dome of blood to protect his younger brother. As Chozo crumbles and dies, he apologizes for not having been a better teacher, but Yuji reassures him that he has done more than enough by standing by his side. Following the death of Chozo, Yuji struggles with his resolve until a surprise appearance from Aoi Todo reignites his desire to fight. Todo has secretly devised a plan with Meimei in order to swap sorcerers inside of Sukuna's domain with crows, thus saving those that are trapped inside. He explains his plan to Yuji, motivating him to continue fighting Sukuna despite the overwhelming odds. Todo then reveals a modified version of his Boogie Woogie curse technique. Since he had lost his left hand, he now uses a Vibra Slap, which is an instrument to trigger the curse technique. With the power to perform 50 swaps per second, Todo and Yuji engage in rapid exchanges with Sukuna, confusing the King of Curses through constant teleportation. As Todo and Yuji fight together in tandem, Todo's unpredictable movements and self-centered fighting style makes it difficult for Sukuna to adjust. Sukuna misreads one of Todo's swaps and he ends up being hit by Yuji's Black Flash, which deals significant damage. As Yuji digs his finger into Sukuna's chest, attempting to tear out his heart. Sukuna gets ready to cast his domain expansion once more, but he is interrupted by an unexpected vision of Gojo walking through the smoke. Chapter 261 sees Sukuna taken aback when he sees what appears to be Gojo, as it's then revealed that Yuta has transplanted his brain into Gojo's body by using Kenjaku's technique, thus allowing him to assume Gojo's form. This really drastic measure was a part of Yuta's plan to defeat Sukuna, although it was met with a lot of resistance by the other sorcerers, especially Maki, due to the potential consequences of it. Despite the objections, Yuta goes ahead with this plan as he activates Unlimited Void in order to clash with Sukuna's malevolent shrine. The two domains collide once again, creating a new showdown between Yuta, now inheriting Gojo's legacy, versus Sukuna, who I'm guessing is really tired at this point. Yuta and Sukuna's fight escalates within the confines of their shrunken domains as Yuta uses Unlimited Void and he goes head to head with Sukuna in an intense hand-to-hand fight. Although Yuta was ready to use Curse Technique Lapse Blue, he is interrupted by Sukuna, who manages to land several hits against him. Sukuna uses Domain Amplification while his domain is still active, and this surprises Yuta, who struggles to control Gojo's Limitless technique due to him being really unfamiliar with Gojo's body. Despite this, Yuta still manages to catch Sukuna off guard by using Cursed Speech, as this immobilizes Sukuna, and Yuta prepares to finish the fight with Hollow Purple. In chapter 263, Yuta's fight with Sukuna comes to a sudden end as both domains collapse. But despite this, Yuta's Hollow Purple still hits Sukuna, but his inexperience with the technique causes him to destroy his domain in the process. Severely injured, Sukuna emerges from the domain, but Yuta, Yuji, and Todo quickly pursue him. Yuta collapses out of exhaustion from the copied brain transplant technique, leaving Yuji and Todo to continue the fight. Todo uses his broken Vibra Slap to continue swapping positions, and this gives Yuji openings to attack Sukuna. At a key moment, Yuji calls for Megumi, using Dismantle to slash at the boundary between Sukuna and Megumi's soul. Sukuna realizes the danger here as he consumes his fingers again to regain control. Then out of nowhere, Hana Kurusu arrives onto the battlefield as she is summoned by Aoi Todo's expanded Boogie Woogie technique. Hana is wielding a glowing trumpet in hand as she blasts Sukuna with Jacob's Ladder, as she attempts to split the souls of Sukuna and Megumi in a last-ditch effort. Hana's Jacob's Ladder purifies the battlefield. While she has weakened Sukuna with her light, Sukuna manages to endure and use debris to climb toward her. Todo gets in the way and blocks a powerful punch from Sukuna, as this knocks both him and Hana out. With everyone pretty much unconscious, Yuji steps up now to fight Sukuna as he launches an attack which briefly staggers the King of Curses. However, Sukuna recovers, unleashing two black flashes which restore his cursed energy and allow him to regenerate his hands. Yuji, remembering his training in barrier techniques, results in him activating his domain expansion. The domain transports Sukuna to a train station where Yuji appears as he once did prior to becoming Sukuna's vessel. Chapter 265 explores a unique moment between Yuji and Sukuna that happens within Yuji's domain. This chapter is really weird and it threw a lot of people off, but they stroll through Yuji's childhood memories and they visit familiar places in Yuji's old town as they recall his experiences growing up, as Sukuna engages reluctantly with him, but Yuji tries to show him the value of simple memories and life beyond the brutality which Sukuna is so used to. The King of Curses, however, remains unmoved by Yuji's sentimentality and his personal attachment to all of these places and what they mean to him. As the conversation between the two of them deepens, Yuji reveals his true intentions, which are to highlight to Sukuna how he undervalues life and to get him to release Megumi. Sukuna, angered by Yuji's attempt at mercy, declares that he will kill everyone Yuji loves. Chapter 265 concludes with tensions escalating as it sets the stage for an epic final confrontation between the two of them. At the beginning of chapter 266, Megumi's soul makes an appearance and he asks Yuji to stop trying to save him. With the death of Sumiki and his dream of protecting her now shattered, Megumi feels as though he no longer has any reason to live. Yuji tries his best to empathize with the despair that Megumi is feeling, and he understands him, but he he is resolute and he refuses to give up on him. Meanwhile, Sukuna uses hollow wicker basket to shield himself temporarily from Yuji's domain, but his anger over being pitied and shown mercy by Yuji distracts him. With the fight intensifying, Megami's soul briefly awakens and it causes shadows to appear under Sukuna's foot, throwing him off balance. Seizing this opportunity, Yuji lands a powerful punch on Sukuna, and this moment breathes life back into Megami's soul, giving Yuji hope. Sukuna is aware of the danger of the situation as he understands the significance of what's just happened as he prepares to strike back, but Yuji continues his relentless attack. In chapter 267, it's revealed that Yuta was bluffing when he claimed that Rika had consumed Sukuna's last finger, but in actuality, Yuta was able to use the shrine technique after Rika had consumed Yuji's finger instead of Sukuna's. At the secret location where Sukuna's last finger is being held, Gakuganji and Utahime are guarding it. They talk about how a curse technique may be able to bypass the indestructible nature of the special grade cursed object. Utahime explains that this could be achieved through a binding vow which allows the curse technique's effects to pass through without actually destroying the object. All of this is in reference to somebody who has surprisingly just regained consciousness. Yes, this is Nobara Kugisaki, who now supports an eye patch as she announces her return with confidence. Nobara wastes very little time as she strikes a nail through Sukuna's final finger, activating resonance. This causes multiple nails to burst from Sukuna's chest. Panicked, the King of Curses realizes Nobara's technique has disrupted his own and it prevents him from using his domain expansion, and this pretty much leaves him vulnerable to the guaranteed hit effect of Yuji's domain. When Yuji realizes that Nobara is alive, his spirits are boosted as he activates the guaranteed effect of his domain using Dismantle to attack Sukuna's soul directly. The battle between Yuji and Sukuna becomes intense as they exchange hand-to-hand blows. Despite his immense power, Sukuna is slowly weakened as Yuji lands a decisive black flash. With every blow, Sukuna's confidence begins to falter. He begins to expel the fingers that he has ingested, but he still believes that Yuji is too weakened to finish him off. Yuji surprises Sukuna with a powerful combination attack, leaving the King of Curses momentarily exposed. As he charges up cursed energy into his fist, Yuji announces that it's time to end Sukuna's reign of terror. His last uppercut, charged with another black flash, hits Sukuna's abdomen with such devastating force that it knocks him out and signals the end of their fight. This chapter ends with Yuji standing victorious over Sukuna as it marks the end of the major conflict of the Shinjuku Showdown arc. In chapter 268, within Megami's mind, Sukuna tries to manipulate him, blaming him for his sister's death and other tragedies. However, Megami realizes that Sukuna is desperate here and he fears his own demise. As Sukuna's presence fades, Megami makes a vow to live now for others rather than himself. Meanwhile, Yuji successfully frees Megami from Sukuna's grasp as Uraume, Sukuna's ally, accepts defeat also, claiming that the sorcerers were only victorious because Sukuna was weakened. Despite Uraume's words, Hakari still remains optimistic, as he takes her words as a compliment. Following the aftermath of the epic battle against Sukuna, Megami wakes up to find Yuji and Nobara preparing to surprise him. The three friends catch up and Yuji reveals that they were given letters from Gojo. As they read the letters, shocking truths are revealed, including Gojo's nonchalant mention of how he killed Megami's father. Nobara's letter included information about the location of her mother, as well as what she was doing, but Nobara does not appear to be interested at all as she crumples up the letter. Meanwhile, Megami is laughing while reading his letter, which prompts Yuji and Nobara to read what Gojo had written, but they react in shock. With Nobara noticing the time, she tells the two of them that it's time now to meet up with Maki and the others, as Megami assumes that it's to apologize to everybody for what's been going on and to thank everyone who fought against Sukuna, but Nobara says that it's for another issue. Yuji elaborates that everyone needs to now work together in order to save Yuta. As the Jujutsu High sorcerers enter a corridor, the three of them hear someone cursing out Yuta's name, as Megami wonders if this is how saving Yuta should sound like. Chapter 271 is titled From Here On Out. So the chapter picks up with Megumi, Nobara and Yuji at the apartment of that young couple that we saw them at the end of chapter 270. So Nobara says that she didn't find a cursed seal or a marking anywhere on this girl, as she says that the cursed user who is affecting her vision is probably nearby. Yuji asks if they think that they are in the effective range of the cursed user at the moment, and Megumi says that it's possible, as that technique could be suited for covert work, or they could be extremely skilled with cursed energy, as this situation is proving to be troublesome. Nobara asks the girl whether if she sees her fiance's face go back to normal ever, and she replies that maybe when she's asleep. So Megumi assumes that they're dealing with a range of at least 50 meters, but to be on the safe side they'll say it's 100 meters that the cursed user needs to be near them in order for the technique to be effective. So Yuji asks what should they do now since they are in the middle of town. Megumi agrees that there are people everywhere, and if they check the buildings then there will be way too many blind spots for them, but if they go to a certain viewpoint then they should be able to notice when the curse technique gets activated again. Yuji suggests that they just need to go to an open field. It would be easy to find the culprit that way. Megumi says that yeah, that would work if the guy that they're dealing with is a total idiot. He says that even if the curse technique is broken by getting out of range, you'd have to be a real idiot to show yourself right after that happens. He says that the individual would just wait it out until things cool down and then start their technique again. Nobara suggests that they send the couple away to an all expenses paid trip, but Megumi says that that probably wouldn't work since the curse user would be able to track their location via his technique, and Megumi suggests that it's probably best not to stalk the stalker. Yuji adds that even if they send them away, the curse user may just reactivate the technique once they come back. Megumi says that this isn't implausible, but by doing so you would put the advantage into the curse user's hands. Yuji is getting pretty frustrated by Megumi's comebacks, and Nobara adds that Megumi is making this curse user out to be like some big-brained individual, as Yuji says that yeah, there are plenty of people more stupider than them. Megumi says that they are going to let the couple leave the range of the technique and then they will strike once the curse technique is reactivated. Yuji says well, this is exactly what they've been saying. Megumi tells them to hold on because that's part of the plan. He says that a 40-floor condo should easily cover 150 meters. He suggests that we'll have them go visit their friend and zip to the top floor to get out of the technique's range, then suggesting that Ichichi-san and a cursed spirit called a window can keep an eye on the buzzer and the entrance. Meanwhile, the three of them will get to a good vantage point and wait for the curse technique to be reactivated. Megumi says that they're dealing with a creep with motivation strong enough to stalk Fukuzawa-san 24 hours a day. Megumi is very confident with this plan as long as the place wasn't wiretapped, and betting on the cursed user not having a technique that allows them to overhear their conversation, everything should be ready for them to catch this stalker. So when the couple get into the elevator and begin ascending the apartment complex, Fukuzawa notices that her fiance's face has returned back to normal. In the next page, we immediately see Nobara identify the cursed user as they ask Nobara who she is, and it seems like the curse technique has been reactivated. Yuji also springs into action, but he uses the curse technique against the two of them, but both of them just look at each other in shock and start laughing. But the curse user is cornered by Megumi's 10 shadows technique. After apprehending him, they bring him to Fukuzawa and ask her whether if she knows this individual. She says that it's the first time that she's seen him, but he aggressively curses at her, asking her who does she think bought her that bag. So it seems like Fukuzawa used to be a hostess and this curse user was one of her customers and used to spend a lot of money on her when she was a hostess. Nobara says that he spent 1,000,000 yen, asking why would she forget that. Yuji reassures the curse user not to be so upset. It's not like he's going to be executed or anything for what he did. The curse user admits that he was in the wrong and he behaved inappropriately, going as far as to say that he knows how to communicate properly, but despite this he ended up pinning all of the blame on Fukuzawa. It is here where we get a flashback where Yuji thinks back to training with Gojo. Yuji tells Gojo that he thought that after training with Kusakabe sensei, he'd switch up and train with him. Gojo says that he guesses that that would be fine, as he then struggles to word what he's going to say next, as he tells Yuji that haven't they had enough of Gojo sensei for one lifetime. Yuji is surprised, but Gojo tells him that he wants him to be a bit more forward thinking. He wants him to think about the future. Gojo tells Yuji that there is a dream that he wants him to carry on after he is gone, should anything happen to him. He tells Yuji that if this is where he is supposed to bow out, then he hopes that in the future his students mature up even more so than he did. He says that among his students there should be at least one who forgets about him and develops their strength completely different from Gojo's. Yuji says that none of them could ever forget him, and he's surprised surprised, saying that Gojo is really acting out of character here, like he's sounding a bit timid or reserved. Gojo laughs at Yuji and tells him that he's such a kid, as he explains that this is confidence. This feeling of confidence is something that he has never had before. He then tells Yuji that he is expecting great things from him, as he asks Yuji if he understands what he means. If you remember a couple of chapters ago, Gojo had left letters for Nobara and Megumi. It seems like these were the precious words that Gojo had departed with Yuji before he had died. And it's great that we are getting a flashback in the final chapter, and we at least get to see Gojo one more time. After this brief flashback, we cut back to the present, as Yuji tells the curse user that he had acknowledged that he had messed up and that's all that matters, as he tells him to take some time to reflect on what he's done, as he then advises him to come and help them out on their next mission, as he tells this curse user that he's expecting great things from him. So Nobara asks Yuji what did he do with that thing. Yuji says that he tossed it. Nobara's like, what? And Yuji says it's going to be fine, stating that it's not like it's dangerous anymore. He even says that it could be the perfect talisman now. We then cut to a conversation between Mahito and Sukuna, as Mahito tells Sukuna who would have thought that he'd see him here. Sukuna notices Mahito and cockily says that isn't this the second conversation that they are having, in reference to when he had threatened Mahito in the past, when he had dared to touch the soul of Yuji. Mahito says that his technique messes with the soul after all, as he welcomes Sukuna to the pathway that all souls must walk on in order to make their way down the cycle. Mahito says that he meant to ask Sukuna that he was lying, wasn't he, to himself and to others, that he wasn't living according to his own stature. Mahito goes on to tell Sukuna that he wanted revenge against everybody who resented and persecuted that cursed, unwanted little wretch. Mahito appears to be referencing this younger version of Uraume who is standing alongside Sukuna. Sukuna says, what difference does it make now? He had lived the only way that he had known how to, and that's exactly how he is choosing to go on. He says actually he did have different paths to walk, two to be precise, but despite this he couldn't help but to spit out the curses that were stirring deep within his body, as he fears that his own curse would burn him from the inside out. He then says that should there be a next time, perhaps it would be nice to walk a different path. Mahito says that that just sounds boring, as he tells Sukuna that he's gone soft. Sukuna says, well, obviously he's lost everything. In this apparent realm of death, Mahito says that so he's the only one who's left sulking like a child, as even Sukuna has accepted his fate in the afterlife. The next page, we see the students from Tokyo Jujutsu High, with Yuta and the gang, along with Yuji, Megumi and Nobara, and then the final page of Jujutsu Kaisen cuts back to that small shed, and we see a box there with Sukuna's middle finger apparently inside this box, and that does appear to be the end of Jujutsu Kaisen. And we have an editor's note here that says, thank you so much for reading these past 6 years. Please look forward to Gege Akutami's next work, and that volumes 29 and 30 will be released together on the 25th of December. And that's the end of Jujutsu Kaisen. There's so much raw reaction coming from people from the end of this chapter. There's so much disappointment over a lot of unresolved plot points and a rushed conclusion which a lot of people are feeling, and I can't deny it, even I feel like this ending is unsatisfactory and in some aspects it's very rushed. A lot of us were expecting a finale that gave us closure, that at least had some depth, and had wrapped up all of the character arcs in a satisfactory manner, but unfortunately this isn't something that we had at the end of Jujutsu Kaisen. I mean, think about it, we didn't even get a funeral for a character like Gojo. I mean, Jujutsu Kaisen, I'm not writing the entire series off, it certainly has its high points, but the final moments of the story just faltered massively. Some people believe that Kinjaku should have been the final villain of Jujutsu Kaisen, especially if the Culling Games arc, which was a pretty huge story arc, was centered around his plan. But to have him then just gotten rid of, and then the focus of the last 30 chapters of the series being on Sukuna, I felt like it was a bit too heavily focused on him, and in the end it just left Kinjaku's entire character as wasted potential. There was very minimal exploration as to his connection with Yuji, and we didn't get a proper explanation of what his ultimate plan was. Why was he wanting to do the merger? Why did he want to merge all of Japan with Master Tengen? Another point of contention is the death of Gojo. I mean, in these last 5 chapters, with the epilogue wrapping up the story of Jujutsu Kaisen, we barely got any mention of Gojo, and this is why people were assuming that he may still be alive. Like, we didn't see a tombstone, we didn't see a funeral, nobody mentioned him directly. Following the aftermath of the battle against Sukuna, it was just really strange. I mean, Nobara returned, Yuta returned, Higuruma also returned, all characters that I thought were definitely dead. So yeah, it was safe to say that we could have expected Gojo to return. I mean, my guy Yuta had his body cut in half and he somehow came back from the brink of death. While Sukuna is a formidable, fearsome villain, the demise of his character felt somewhat anticlimactic. There was this expectation of this grand showdown with Yuji. Finally, Sukuna and Yuji were going to fight, and then everything just ended really abruptly. It's like Gege lit a fuse, and the firework was just about to set off, and then it just fizzled out. As an overall story, Jujutsu Kaisen successfully subverted our expectations numerous times, but it definitely fumbled the bag, I think, with its conclusion. Yuji's character growth throughout the series has been praised by some people, but I don't think that the growth of his character was fully capitalized upon with the ending. His final fight against Sukuna lacked proper weight and depth. There is some solace though. This flashback that we had in chapter 271 was nice, at least, as it further built upon Yuji's relationship with Gojo and the high expectations that he had for his future. And it felt really nice hearing Gojo said that, you know what, he expects great things from him. Yeah, and then the last page, this middle finger of Sukuna, which just feels like Gege giving us fans a middle finger. It's the final reveal. Sukuna's middle finger has left fans feeling divided, understandably. Some people have interpreted this as a hint to a future Jujutsu Kaisen continuation, as this is an open-ended finale. Some are questioning whether if Gege was deliberate in doing this or whether if this is a sign of him having rushed his ending. Yeah, I think with Jujutsu Kaisen, the best way to summarize it is that the journey was great. Like, there were a lot of high moments, but the ultimate destination left much to be desired. I almost forgot to mention this, but Happy News was being promoted alongside the release of the final chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen. People were assuming that it was going to be the reveal of a continuation sequel series of Jujutsu Kaisen, but unfortunately it's just some information that the Jujutsu Kaisen manga has reached 100 million copies in circulation, which definitely is an incredible feat and it deserves a lot of celebration, but it's no Jujutsu Kaisen Part 2, unfortunately. So in terms of the anime, the Hidden Inventory arc anime compilation movie is releasing, and there's going to be a Jujutsu Kaisen stage play in December 2024, along with a Jujutsu Kaisen art exhibition in 2025, along with a new guidebook releasing on the 4th of October 2024. And then yeah, you have the usual stuff like all of the current serialized manga artists in Jump commenting on the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen. But yeah, personally, I'm just really disappointed by the fact that we didn't get to know what Yuji's domain is called. We didn't get to see the full potential of Megumi, which Gojo was teasing throughout the story. We never got to see the complete domain of Megumi. Not one person talked about the death of Gojo following the Shinjuku Showdown. We didn't get a backstory for Sukuna. The plot thread of Kinjaku meeting with other country leaders and introducing them to the concept of cursed energy and cursed spirits went absolutely nowhere. These last 5 chapters I felt like could have done so much more, but instead we were catching up with characters from the Culling Game arc, like some of the incarnated sorcerers and even Charles Bernard. I mean, do we really need to see those guys? I'm also really disappointed with the character of Megumi. I had so many high expectations for him. I even had my own headcanon that with his full potential awakened, he could surpass Gojo, but we never really got to see any of that. The ultimate goal of Yuji breaking the cycle of curses was never fulfilled because the students are currently still going on missions, and it seems like this goal just wasn't achieved. It's just a lot to process. The ending of Jujutsu Kaisen has just happened. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people talking about the rise and fall of Jujutsu Kaisen or how Jujutsu Kaisen fell off. And like I've said in the video, it's not that Jujutsu Kaisen was a terrible series, it's just it fumbled its ending. Gege fumbled Kinjaku's character. We didn't get any Heian era flashbacks, as I really did want to see Sukuna in his prime. We learned nothing new about the Gojo clan, and again the link between Yuji and Kinjaku wasn't properly explored. I do understand with writing stories there are some things that you want to leave to the reader's imagination, but Gege just introduced way too many concepts, which clearly he was planning to expand upon, but in the end he never did. I mean, the story would not have changed one way or the other if these things were not introduced, because in the end they were inconsequential to the plotline. I mean, do we really need to know that the extended world beyond Japan knows about the existence of cursed spirits and cursed energy? What was the entire point of the Culling Games? For me, Jujutsu Kaisen really peaked during the Shibuya incident arc. That was just a top tier story arc. I loved everything, the way that Sukuna fought against Jogo, the reintroduction of Toji, the demise of Mahito, Yuji losing his mind when he wakes wakes up after Sukuna's rampage. There was just so much that was going well, and then the Culling Games arc kicked off, and then the Shinjuku Showdown, and it was all just downhill, honestly. But we've reached the point of the video where I do want to hand over the discussion to all of you. This was chapter 271 of Jujutsu Kaisen, and it was the end of the Shinjuku Showdown arc. What do you think about Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole? What were your favorite moments of this series? And do you agree with me that there was a drop in the quality of the storytelling following the Culling Games arc? I do look forward to reading all of your thoughts and to see you all continue the discussion in the comments. At this point, I've covered the entirety of the Jujutsu Kaisen series. I've made videos on every single story arc. I've talked about every character, every ability, and every technique. After having dedicated a lot of time to watching the anime, reading the manga, making videos about this series, it's just disappointing to see the story end in this way. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, and lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.